back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co host, Alex Wilson. And today we are once again going to be talking about the New York Giants quarterback situation, but we're not going to be talking about what they're going to do with the number 3 overall pick. Instead, what's their second pick going to look like? And could that be the quarterback? Now, obviously, we've had a lot of discussions, Alex, about Russell Wilson and the impact that signing him might have on the Giants' draft plans. They absolutely could go ahead with the best player available at number 3 overall, but that doesn't give them a long-term solution at the quarterback position. Russell Wilson's 36 and on a 1-year contract. Jameis Winston is 31 and only on a 2-year contract. So what's the Giants' long-term plans at quarterback, and could it be Ole Miss quarterback Jaxson Dart, who the Giants reportedly have spent an extensive amount of time with? Could the Giants be one of the teams that are rumored to be interested in trading up from the second round back into the back end of the first round to go ahead and take the Rebels quarterback? That's what we're going to go ahead and discuss in today's live episode. But before we dive into all of that, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? Happy Friday. And what are your thoughts on Jaxson Dart being a potential target for the Giants to trade up and draft next month?
I'm doing pretty well, man. Thank you, Lewis, for the motivation this morning. I guess this afternoon now, looking extra handsome today. Anthony and I doing our best to show up and look our best for you guys on Fireside Giants. But I'll tell you what, this is an interesting discussion because I think, we heard from Daniel Jeremiah. And I know, Anthony, you're a big proponent of Daniel Jeremiah and his opinion, and kind of he's plugged into a lot of NFL teams. He believes that the Giants are leaning towards not taking a quarterback at 3. What would that mean? Well, that probably means you're taking Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. Now, we know the Giants have a one-on-one, one of the only teams to have a one-on-one with Abdul Carter. And the Browns, obviously, of course, are also doing a heavy, extensive meeting with him and dinner with all their top brass. So these teams are looking at these top blue chip prospects very closely. Obviously, with the intention that Cam Ward goes first overall to the Titans, the Giants get to walk away if they so decide and so choose with a blue chip prospect in Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. You can create an identity in the trenches like we had in the past, or create a totally new identity with Neighbors and Hunter at receiver and have a backup plan at cornerback if somebody gets hurt or whatnot. Not a bad situation to find yourself in if you're the Giants. Getting one of the 2 best players in this draft class. The draft could end up starting at 3 for us. And, Sanders, Hunter on the board. We want to talk about going BPA in the first round, though, Anthony, and then what it would take and what it might look like to move up to, let's say, the early to mid-20s to get Jaxson Dart. Let's assume that he lands in that area. He could go anywhere. I have no idea. He could go before. He could go after. But I think the consensus is like early 20s makes a lot of sense for him. This is a guy that's a year younger than obviously Sanders and Cam Ward, and he's got a lot of really good qualities. So I want to kind of dive into that. We've watched the film on him a couple times. We kind of know what style of player he is, what system he's coming from, which, a lot of people will say it's a half field system with Lane Kiffin. He really knows how to get these receivers open at the collegiate level. He's one of the best, schematic coaches in that regard, building a high octane offense. And Jaxson Dart, I'll tell you what, maximized it. He did it excellent running that offense. And a lot of people will say he's a one-read quarterback. I don't think he's a one-read quarterback. I think the first read was just always open. And that's kind of what boded well for Jaxson Dart. That scheme was very favorable for him. And I think that is a concern. But I want to get your opinion on that, and obviously what you think it might take to get up to the mid first round to acquire him.
I'll say I do think he's a one read quarterback, okay? But that's not necessarily his fault. Just because he was asked to run a one read offense doesn't mean he can't eventually become a multi read quarterback. He just wasn't asked to do these things at the collegiate level. The offense that Ole Miss ran was just very simple. RPO, you hand it off if there's a rush lane. If there's not, you make the quick first read pass. Like, that's not Jaxson Dart's fault. What the Giants need to determine, was the Ole Miss offense a one read offense because of Jaxson Dart, or was Jaxson Dart a one read quarterback because of Ole Miss's offense? And I think it's because of Ole Miss's offense that Jaxson Dart was a one read quarterback and not the other way around. I think that there are plays on his film where he demonstrates an ability to A, get off script and make plays downfield, and B, go through his progressions and make some throws past the first read. Again, he just wasn't asked to do that a whole lot throughout his collegiate career. But that doesn't mean that he can't. And I think that he is like the perfect prospect where he's got the tools, he's got the traits, he's got the smarts as well. I think that in the right system, with the proper amount of time to sit, grow, and develop, he absolutely could push past those first reads and become a pretty decent player at the next level. So I like Jaxson Dart a lot. Now, if you're asking where the Giants need to trade up to draft him in the first round, I think you got to look at the order. And there's one team that really stands out to me, Alex, as the team that the Giants might need to jump. But if they jump this team, they're probably going to pay a premium. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers with the number 21 overall pick. Now, we know that they're obviously deep in discussions with Aaron Rodgers. The Giants signing Russell Wilson seems to be an indicator that Rodgers is going to go to the Steelers. However, it also could be an indicator that Rodgers is leaning towards retirement. He's currently deciding between retirement and the Steelers. Now, if Aaron Rodgers were to retire and the Steelers were left without a starting quarterback on their roster, you'd have to imagine that they're going to go ahead and take a quarterback at the top of the 2025 NFL draft or in the first round because they're not picking at the top, but they're picking number 21 overall. And they could be a team, even if they do sign Aaron Rodgers to a 1-year contract, that looks at Jaxson Dart and says, yeah, let's put him behind Rodgers for a year. This is who we want to draft. So I think the Steelers are the team to be afraid of, and they're picking 21st overall. The Giants are picking 34th overall. That's second in the second round. So in order to trade all the way up ahead of the Steelers, they got to go up 24 spots to number 20, where the Denver Broncos are. And you're probably talking about shipping away this year's second, obviously, to move up. Probably a third round pick from this year. The Giants have 2 of them. And probably also a top 100 selection in next year's draft. So the price of drafting Jaxson Dart in the mid first round is actually probably going to be pretty expensive for the New York Giants. Alex, do you think that's a worthy price to pay for a developmental high upside quarterback prospect such as Jaxson Dart?
It's a good question. And listen, you have to think about, what the Giants really want here. In my opinion, you skip over the top 3 quarterbacks in this draft class, whether it's, Hunter, or rather Shedeur Sanders, whether it's obviously Cam Moore not being available, and then Jaxson Dart. The drop-off is pretty steep. The only guy that with an elite trait after that is Jalen Milroe with the rushing quality, right? That's really the only guy that has an elite trait after that. Dart, in my opinion, you sit him for a year behind Jameis Winston. You sit him for a year behind Russell Wilson. I think that there's a really decent probability that him sitting for a year and learning an NFL offense, playing in the system behind the scenes in camp, maybe getting a couple opportunities late in games if there's a blowout situation. I don't think that's a horrible situation to find yourself in if you're Jaxson Dart. And I think that Brian Daboll's going to look at Jaxson Dart and see a baller. I think that he kind of matches what Daboll loves in a quarterback. This aggressive, downfield-oriented player with a bit of athleticism. He can throw on the run. He can improvise. He loves to do, exciting things. He has a knack for making big plays. I know he has the turnover problems, but guys, you look how many quarterbacks in the past had massive turnover problems. Like, obviously, Josh Allen's the number one you point at and say, this guy could not stop turning the ball over, and he got better over time. I don't think that Jaxson Dart has a bad turnover problem. I think that sometimes his decision-making can be poor, but you can say the same thing about Cam Ward. Sometimes his decision-making is really, really bad. So I think that if you're Brian Daboll and you want to run an offense that you have built your career on, this aggressive, downfield-oriented offense that relies on a quarterback being an improviser, Jaxson Dart stands out to you. And I think he's kind of a attractive piece to the puzzle. So if and really it comes down to Daboll, right? Because Joe Shane's not the one coaching these guys. He's not the one developing these guys. He's just making the picks and finding out a way how to get the player that Daboll wants. And if Daboll says to him, I really like Jaxson Dart, he doesn't need to start right now. I think he needs a year to sit, year to learn. We don't have to spend a top 10 pick on him. You could argue that he could convince Joe Shane, go trade up and get that guy. And the best thing about Jaxson Dart, Anthony, I think this is the point that you're going to like the most, honestly, is that it doesn't compromise your ability to take a quarterback in next year's draft because you're not giving away your future first-round pick. You're only giving away next year's second and this year third, most likely, or this year's second, rather, and maybe this year's third, whatever it might be, whatever the draft capital would be to move up. You're not going to have to give up your first-round pick next season. And if you somehow lose enough games and you're sitting there and then top quarterbacks on the board and you're like, oh, well, I guess now we just draft this guy. You have a really young quarterback room. You have Neighbors, you have Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, and you have a really good foundation to build off of with a couple of young quarterbacks, or you could always trade Dart, whatever. You know what I mean? You have options now in that regard. So it's possible that it could go in a direction that kind of equals that. But I don't know. Walking away in a draft with Travis Hunter or Carter and Dart, I think that's a huge win. I would label that as a win because I would bet on Daboll being able to iron out some of the deficiencies in Dart's game. I think that they're, very similar to stuff that he's worked with in the past. The question is, How much time does he need? Is he ready for that? We haven't seen him in an NFL style offense, so there are obviously red flags and concerns. We had them when we watched the film. Notably, he bails out of the pocket a lot. Sometimes he makes bad decisions. Sometimes his mechanics are off. Like there are problems with his game, but I think that there's nothing there that says to me they're not coachable. You know what I mean? Like I do think he's a very coachable player, and he's probably the best athlete of the top three quarterbacks in this draft class, which does bode well to me as well.
Yeah, I do think he's a really impressive athlete. Like, I think a lot of people do sleep on Jackson Dart's ability to get out of the pocket and make plays with his legs. You know, when we did some of those film breakdowns on the channel and we were watching Jackson Dart on the All 22, we saw several plays where he got off script and also was used as a rusher. Now, probably used as a rusher up the middle a little bit too much. If you remember, Alex, when we were watching that film, we were very confused by some of the play designs rushing him up the middle of the offensive line. But even still, he did show an ability, not necessarily a tackle breaking ability, but a vision ability to create some space as a rusher and gain some additional yardage. I want to pull up this comment real quick, though, Alex, just because it's very funny. Not happy with Drew Lock. Wouldn't have this debate about the quarterbacks if it wasn't for him. Yeah, shout out to Drew Lock, very nice guy that I just saw at a Starbucks about 35 minutes ago. So I hope you enjoyed your coffee, Drew Lock. But anyway, I want to talk about Abdul Carter, who you just mentioned. Like you're saying, if the Giants walk away with either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, well, I want to bring up Abdul Carter because the New York Giants are having a private meeting with him today, Alex. He had a meeting last night, went to dinner with the Cleveland Browns top of brass, met with their GM, I think their president of football ops, and their head coach. They all went out, had a nice dinner. And the rumors seem to suggest that the Browns are leaning towards Abdul Carter with the number 2 overall pick. However, the New York Giants are the only NFL team having a private meeting with him today at the Penn State Pro Day. So, what do you think, Alex? Do you think the Giants are leaning towards Abdul Carter over Travis Hunter, or do you think it's too soon to tell considering Colorado's Pro Day isn't until later next month?
I mean, it really depends on what the Giants want, right? If they want a receiver slash cornerback, a guy that can fill whatever position they need, like injuries happen. You know, if something happens to Banks or Paulson Adebo or something happens to Neighbors in training camp, now they have the solution there. Like you have a guy that can step in and be that player, whatever side of the ball they need. So it gives you some flexibility. But Carter, he's an identity, man. Like in the trenches with him and Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence, and maybe you even draft the defensive tackle, you probably have one of the best, youngest, most powerful and dynamic defensive fronts in the sport. And no, as we saw in the Super Bowl, look what happens when you have a really good defensive line. The Eagles dominated. They put Patrick Mahomes in prison. So, you know, you can see what a great defensive line can do for a team. But then again, you can also see what a great receiver can do for a team. You look at what the Bengals and what they got from Jamar Chase, and but that doesn't always equal wins. Obviously, you know, it depends who the quarterback is, and you know, in this instance, I've never been a huge fan of Sanders. You guys know this. I was always a much bigger fan of Cam Ward, and I wished we could have got him, but unfortunately, you couldn't. The Titans obviously love him too much, and it doesn't seem like the Giants are going to be able to trade up to first overall or are willing to give up what it takes. But you know, at this point in time, if it's Carter or it's Hunter, who do I think the Giants like? I think they're probably going to opt for offense, Anthony. And the reason I say that is because they just spent $1.50 on their defense this free agency. They got a safety. They spent some interior. They got another depth piece on the interior line. They added a CB1. Like they spent a lot of money on the secondary, and I think that they probably are. I mean, look, they could go for Carter. I'm not saying they won't, but if they want to get a young quarterback and drop them into a good foundation, Hunter and Neighbors is about as good as it gets. You know what I mean? Like if you want to support a young quarterback and the growth there with two cost-efficient players on rookie contracts, and then you have that rookie contract at quarterback in the future too, you have a boatload of money to spend long term on solving other spots, and you're just in a good spot. Like the foundation is there to like have a long term success. So it definitely makes a lot of sense for me. I think Hunter makes a lot of sense. But of course, like if they get Carter, I'm gonna be happy either way. Both those guys are the blue chip best prospects in this draft class.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do think they're the two best prospects in this draft class, and I'd be more than happy with either one. But I will say about Abdul Carter, I wonder though if there is, you know, a sentiment maybe inside the Giants building that they just drafted a pass rusher very high overall, you know, number 5 in 2022 with Kayvon Thibodeau. Do you think, Alex, that maybe they feel like it's too soon to give up on Kayvon Thibodeau, and that's what would potentially deter them from drafting Abdul Carter? Or do you think that this is more of a best player available scenario? Carter might be that on their board, so they're going to take him anyway. I'm wondering where you think, I know where you stand. You probably feel like, you know, Thibodeau doesn't stop you from drafting Abdul Carter. But do you think that Thibodeau might stop the Giants from drafting Abdul Carter based on how much they invested in him with a top 5 overall pick?
I think it's a great point, and I thought about this myself today because I was like, they just spent a 5th overall pick 3 years ago on Kayvon Thibodeau. That's a massive allocation of resources. You know, like, 5th overall pick is no joke, and they need to get the most out of him. I do think it gives them pause. You know, I do think it says to them, where does Kayvon Thibodeau now slot in? What is his role if we draft Abdul Carter, who's currently dealing with a shoulder injury and a stress fracture in his foot? You know, he's not going to be participating at his pro day. So I do think, like, if you're the Giants and you're thinking about Kayvon, does he stop you from getting a potential All Pro edge rusher? Absolutely not. You know, maybe you try to move Kayvon in a deal to move up to get Dart. You know, maybe he's a piece to a different puzzle. Who knows? Like, now he becomes an asset that you could leverage in a different situation. So it's possible that they could think that way, or Kayvon Thibodeau falls into that rotational edge rusher 3 role, which would be disappointing because I don't think that, you know, I think he should be starting, at least if it's not on the Giants, another team. But maybe he becomes a trade piece in that instance. I really don't know, but I don't think that Kayvon Thibodeau should stop them from taking a player that could be an All-Pro, you know, for a very long time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I gotta say, I think that I agree with you because, you know, as much as I like Kayvon Thibodeau, he definitely has not reached his ceiling. He has not hit his ceiling yet. So I think that there's still some value there, but he's entering a very pivotal contract year. And if Kayvon Thibodeau were to get hurt or something this year, he's been hurt a couple of times, then I think you're going to be happy to have a guy like Abdul Carter on your roster. So we do have a super chat. As a fair warning to everybody who's watching, and we're using a new streaming program, which is why we look a little bit different on here. I don't know how to pull up the super chat. Just going to be completely transparent. I'm not seeing it here. Don't know how to get it up, so I'm just going to read it off from YouTube. It's from Giants Realist. Giants Realist, I really do appreciate you leaving the super chat. He says, would you take Hunter at 3, trade back up for Shedeur if he fell past the 9? Also, when Dable/Shane ever got fired, would coach us if we got both. Dion would coach us if we got both. Yeah, I do think that's something that a lot of Giants fans have had a big kind of idea towards, or like a gravitation towards, is Deion Sanders potentially becoming the coach if Dable gets fired and we draft Shedeur Sanders. You know, Deion has said in the past that he only wants to coach at the next level if he's coaching his son. So if the Giants do draft Shedeur Sanders, then they become the top landing spot for Deion Sanders if he ever makes the jump to the league. And I'll say this, if Shedeur Sanders does make it past the Giants at 3 and then makes it past the Saints at 9, that slide can probably go up until 21 with the Steelers, like I was mentioning earlier. And so again, I think it's the same story. If you're talking about trading up into the mid 15 to 20 range for Jaxson Dart, Shedeur Sanders, I do think, is the better quarterback prospect. So if he were to fall into that range, and if I had to pick between those two guys, Jaxson Dart or Shedeur Sanders, I'm more comfortable making the trade up for Shedeur Sanders personally. So yeah, I mean, in a world, obviously I've said this a couple times. I said this as a joke like a month or so ago. If Shedeur Sanders keeps falling in draft stock, maybe the Giants land both Travis Hunter and team him back up with Shedeur. I said that as a joke. Now I feel like it's starting to become a little bit of a reality. And if it becomes a possibility on draft night, yeah, I'm going to be screaming for it, watching the draft and hoping that that happens, because I think that would be really cool to see Travis and Shedeur maintain their chemistry at the next level in Giants blue, no less. So, Alex, you know, what's your take on that? If we take Hunter at 3, Shedeur starts to fall, do you think that Joe Shane should get aggressive, trade back up into the mid-first round, and try and snag Shedeur Sanders and pair him back up with Travis?
That would be crazy, right? That would be, I mean, ideal, I would say. That chemistry would be awesome to see. And I agree with you. Sanders is a better prospect than Jaxson Dart. I've always been at kind of odds with myself and if he's worth 3rd overall pick. But if he slid that far, yeah, absolutely. Why not take a chance there? Why not go out there and try to move up and get Sanders plus Travis Hunter? I mean, that's a risk that I would believe is worth taking, because you're not going to have to give up your 1st round pick next year, and you walk away with a quarterback and the best receiver in this draft class / corner, and they both have chemistry. Like, there's chemistry there already. So, you know, you get to walk into a situation. You could drop Sanders in 2026 and feel pretty good about what your offense is, because you have 2 elite playmakers. You still have Slayton on this extension. I know Wandale's going into his final year. You got Theo Johnson, Tyrone Tracy, and someone asked a really good question before about, do we think that the Giants should be looking to draft a running back in this class? Anthony, I'll let you take that one because I know you have a guy in mind that you like.
I have a few guys in mind that I like. I really like this running back class. And, if you're talking about the best player available strategy and the way that the Giants should be drafting, probably not for need. Like, they have a lot of needs, sure, but they also don't have that many established starters that should prevent them from drafting a player at this position or that position. And the running back class in this year's draft is what Todd McShay said is the best in the last 25 years. That was his estimation of this class. And you can go to the other analysts as well, whether you're talking Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler of The Athletic, Todd McShay, as I mentioned, Mel Kiper. All of them across the board say that this running back class is special. And if the Giants are taking the BPA strategy, at some point in this draft, the best player available when they're on the clock will be a running back. And I think that they should take one because as much as I think Tyrone Tracy Jr. is a special talent with a lot of promise and potential in this league, he's not stopping me from adding another promising young talent in the backfield. Devin Singletary, yes, the Giants signed him to a 3-year deal last offseason. He's got 2 years left on his contract, and in fact, I think they can get out of it after this season. He's also nearing his 30s. That's not a player that I necessarily need around long term. Instead, I'd rather a pairing of a Tyrone Tracy Jr. plus another special dynamic running back alongside him that they can grow together for the next several years, similar and reminiscent to what we saw with the Detroit Lions with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I think that's really a great example to bring up because you might think, all right, we have Tyrone Tracy Jr., we don't need a running back. But what's better than one running back is two running backs. Like, I think having an offense that can be dynamic with a pairing of running back talents is exciting and can really keep defenses guessing and create a much more explosive rushing attack. So I like Trevor Etienne out of Georgia, the son of, or not son, the younger brother of Travis Etienne for the Jaguars. I think he's a very, very interesting talent who's going to be around on day 3, not even day 2 talent, but day 3. Obviously, a lot of people like Cam Scatabo out of Arizona State. He's exciting, a little bit on the slower side of things, but just a physical kind of versatile weapon as well in terms of his ability to make plays as a receiver. I think RJ Harvey on day 2 out of UCF is also a pretty explosive and interesting talent. And there's that kid, Jaden Blue. I think he went to Texas. He ran like the
Super
4.2
fast.
something 40-yard dash. He is a blazer. There is a lot of talent at the running back position in this draft class. And like I said, I think having 2 premier running backs in this league is just a very exciting proposition, especially because of the injury, frequency at that position and every other factor. So I'm all in on drafting a running back.
Me too, and I would love Cam Scatabo to be honest with you. I think that if he was there at the right time, that dude just like he has a different physicality about him. You know what I mean? The Giants need another physical runner. You know what I mean? Like when we watch Brandon Jacobs absolutely destroying people back in the day, I know Cam Scatabo is nothing like Brandon Jacobs, but more so just the point of just utter toughness. The Giants need to be a tough team to play. How long has it been, Anthony, since we've watched a team? We've watched a Giants team that we're like, this team is just an absolute grinder for every single opposition. For every opponent, they have to get through this team. It's not like you're walking through them, like freaking walking the park to the meadow. You have to fight tooth and nail to win this game. Right? Cam Scatabo is kind of like that. Like he's kind of like that type of player that you have to absolutely destroy before he gives up. Like this guy's playing with injuries and playing through everything. You watch the playoff run guys most likely in college football. Like the guy was hurt for like the whole last portion of that run, and he was still putting up ridiculous numbers. Sometimes, and I think this is like something that I try to remind myself is sometimes just don't overthink it. You know what I mean? Like Cam Scatabo, like some people will say, well, he has a lot of miles on his legs and he's not that fast. I think he ran a 4.65 today. Like it's mostly just don't overthink good players sometimes. And I think that that's kind of how I look at it. So whatever it might be, if it's Cam Scatabo, if it's Travis Etienne, like the Giants need to walk away with a running back in this draft class. This is a really good draft class. They've drafted tight ends multiple years in a row. It's time to dip back into the running back pool and go out there and get a player who is going to add another element, not a similar one to Tyrone Tracy by any means. I think Tracy, by the way, is going to be a much better receiver this year. He had a lot of drops last season. I think that will be a big part of his game that will improve in year 2. But the different style, like I know you talked about Etienne. Do you think he's the right style, this right fit? Kind of as elusive, he can absolutely take off. Do you think he's the right fit alongside Tyrone Tracy, or do you want someone that's a little bit more of a bruiser?
I think that he is a good fit because he feels like the perfect change of pace back. ETN is like a really good one cut, and boom, now he's gone. And I do think, like Tyrone Tracy Jr. is pretty elusive, but he also does keep his head down and fall forward for ugly yards. Like that was one of the things that really impressed us with Tyrone Tracy Jr. during the preseason and early portions of the season was his ability to grind out ugly yardage. So I don't necessarily think that their skill sets overlap too much. I think that they're pretty different. I think that Tyrone Tracy Jr. is a great between the tackles rusher, and I think he proved that. Long between the tackles run for a touchdown versus the Steelers, as an example. Couple of goal line plunges for touchdowns during a few of those games last season. I think that ETN is more of that change of pace, one cut, boom, now he's off to the races, spell back. And so I actually think that they really could pair quite nicely together. We have a few super chats rolling in. Once again, guys, as a reminder, I don't know how to pull them up. I will work on that for the next live stream, but for now, just going to read them off. This one from SPP Williams. This is $5 in not US dollars. Is this the euro pound? I think this is international currency. So, an FSG viewer from across the globe, happy to have you. Thank you so much. Who wins the most games for Shane and Dable, Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter? Alex, I'll let you take the first crack at that question because it's definitely an interesting one.
Who wins the most games for Hunter? I mean, I would say probably Hunter in this instance, just because I see him as a receiver next to Neighbors, and Russell Wilson is head and shoulders. I know he's not getting paid a whole ton, but guys, Russell Wilson is so much better than Daniel Jones, and so much better than Drew Lock, and so much better than Tommy DeVito. And Hunter is one of the best deep ball receivers in this draft class. Unbelievable body control. How do you stop those two guys? For the average NFL team, your CB1 usually isn't very good, the average NFL team. Your CB2 is going to get absolutely murdered by either of those two guys. It's an embarrassment of riches. And Russell Wilson, you have a good enough offensive line, they're going to be unstoppable. It's going to be straight up unstoppable. I think offense is going to help this team win games right now. I think the defense, they've invested a lot. They're still probably going to draft a defensive tackle, I would imagine. But I think Hunter probably gives you, because you have a starting pass rusher and Kayvon Thibodeau, and this kind of will parlay into the next super chat. But I do think this team could use a star WR1 alongside their star WR1, because that's what it takes. I mean, Anthony, how many times, we said it yesterday, you made a really good point. Every team that's good in the NFL right now has multiple stars on offense. It's not a one-trick pony show. It's not a Malik Neighbors show. You need to have another competent star to aid and kind of benefit that quarterback situation. So Travis Hunter and Neighbors is more than good enough. You have, now you're walking into Dallas and Jerry Jones is like, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like my defense has to stop Neighbors and Travis Hunter. Like now Jerry's a little bit up in arms about this. I think that's kind of what I think ultimately, like, you have to have that level of firepower these days. And the Giants have a chance to get it. So I do think Hunter gives them more wins now and probably long term, to be honest with you. But that doesn't mean Carter isn't going to make a substantial impact. The margin may be very slim there. I really don't know. It could be either or. I just visualize the Giants needing more offense. It's been a long time coming since we've had an even average competent offense.
Oh yes, it's been way too long, several years now. But like you said, and as I made the point yesterday, you look at all the top offenses in the NFL. They don't just have one playmaker that they run their offense through. They have one elite playmaker, and then they pair that playmaker with another elite playmaker, whether that be an elite wide receiver tight end duo, wide receiver running back duo, or double wide receiver elite duo. The top offenses all have two elite playmakers. Right now, the Giants have one with Malik Neighbors. They have an up-and-coming good player there with, of course, Tyrone Tracy Jr. But getting another star in there, I think, is important. But I will say this, if we're asking who wins the Giants more games, you could make a pretty strong case for Abdul Carter just because games really are won and lost in the trenches. And the impact in terms of the analytics and data, Alex, on sacks and the way those kill drives and literally take points off the board is rather compelling. So stacking up the defensive line, you can never go wrong with that. But I do side more towards bringing in an elite playmaker like Travis Hunter, especially because I didn't even mention guy can make an impact on defense too. So he's just very special. All right, so we have another super chat here. This one from Che Saucy. Appreciate you. He says, FSG, love the show. Your views are spot on with mine. I know Kayvon and Burns are not the greatest edge setters. Is there a package where we could play all three pass rushers 3 downs if we draft Carter? Yeah, absolutely, because I think the thing with Abdul Carter that I like so much is his physical strength and acumen. He's not like Kayvon, where I feel like Kayvon, not that he's undersized for the position, but he doesn't have that raw strength that a lot of these edge setting edge rushers do have. So I think with Carter, you don't have that concern. And if you want to get creative, you can move him into the interior. We've seen a lot of creative defensive packages. I think it was Patrick Graham when he was the defensive coordinator of the Giants would do this a lot. Take those edge rushers, Leonard Williams to be exact. Leonard Williams would often line up on the outside of the offensive tackle. You would see Patrick Graham take him, stick him right in the middle of the defensive line as a stand-up linebacker and have him pass rush that way. That way he gets a running start, just right barrels into the guard. You could see Abdul Carter move around in the same way. Yeah, get his hand in the dirt in a 3-point stance over the tackle, or move inside and be in a 3 or a 2-point stance, or even a 4-point stance if that's how he chooses to line up. So I think Carter is that versatile weapon that moves inside and outside. And in terms of having all three of these guys on the field for all 3 downs, it could be a little bit challenging, but I think that it becomes easier when you remember, Alex, Abdul Carter started his collegiate career as an inside linebacker. So he's not just an edge rusher. He is a versatile weapon that can move all over the defense. You don't ever have to take that kid off of the field because he can line up at inside linebacker. He can line up at outside linebacker, on the edge, on the defensive line. Guy can literally probably play all 7 defensive front positions, which is why you really, really like the potential of Abdul Carter. So, Alex, I'll let you also give your take on that. What kind of packages do you see here where the Giants can get all 3 of their pass rushers, Burns, Thibodeaux, and potentially if they drafted Carter, get all 3 of them on the field at the same time?
It's not going to be hard to do. It's not going to be difficult to accomplish that. And it makes me think of Micah Parsons, like straight up. Like it's the best comp because how many times have we seen Micah Parsons standing up over to the center and then running twists and stunts? You know what I mean? We've seen him do it 100 times. And you have the flexibility to do that with a player like Abdul Carter, who is just even sniffing his potential. He had 1 year as a true edge rusher, and this guy's got power, he's got speed, he's got strength. You could stand him up, you could sit him down, you could put him in any stance you want, and he's going to be a powerful impact piece. You could get really, really interesting looks with this type of player. You could easily get Kayvon Burns and a guy like Abdul Carter on the field at the same time. And on 3rd downs, when you need to put some pressure on, when you need to get some extra pressure, you could have you could theoretically, Anthony, 3rd downs, and it's a passing play. You could take out your other defensive tackle and just have Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeaux, and Abdul Carter on there, basically like a NASCAR package, and just rush. There's no offensive line that's going to be able to stop that level of pass rush, most likely, or at least very, very few. So it gives you so much versatility on the defensive front. So absolutely great question. I think that it's unlimited. It really is unlimited in terms of the potential you have with a guy like Abdul Carter on the defensive front. And like I keep saying, and I'm going to keep hammering this word home for you guys, identity. Abdul Carter gives your defense an identity, and it is an elite pass rush defense with a good secondary after the recent investment. So yeah, if you want a great defense, Abdul Carter is the way to go in this instance. If you want a much better offense with a chance to situate a young quarterback in that system, Travis Hunter is probably the best opportunity there too. So like you really can't go wrong here, which is why I keep trying to say I am really happy with Carter or with Hunter. Like either of those 2 guys, I'm walking away like we just got a blue chip prospect that is most likely going to be elite. Like the closest you can get to guaranteed. Obviously, nobody's guaranteed, but it's the closest you can get to being this guy is going to be an absolute monster at the next level.
I totally agree with you. And I think that was a really great question, Chase Saucy. Thank you for sending that one in because that did require a little bit of critical thinking. We had to come up with some different ways and kind of get into the DC's headset there and, kind of brainstorm how you get Carter on the field in creative packages. So next super chat here from Corp CA. Appreciate you with this one. Can someone answer a question for me? Yes, absolutely we can. If the Browns don't have a legit quarterback to start the season, then why is it that so many are thinking that the Browns will ignore Sanders and allow him to fall to the New York Giants? So I think there's a few reasons why. I'm going to go ahead and say that I think they're sneakily in the market for a veteran quarterback. The guy that I think they're secretly targeting is Kirk Cousins. Alex, I don't know if you saw this picture that went viral on the internet in Browns land. Kirk Cousins was over in Cleveland yesterday having lunch at Chipotle. So he might be meeting with the Cleveland Browns in secrecy, and it's just not been made public, but he could end up being traded there by the time the NFL draft rolls around. So if that's the case, that they have a starting quarterback to move through this season with, they're not in a rush. They still have Deshaun Watson under the worst contract in NFL history. He's going to be there for another couple of years. So with a regime that's been handcuffed by that ugly contract that they gave to that ugly human being, they're kind of stuck here. They don't need to draft a quarterback. They can kind of just sit pretty with a veteran, get by for a year with a really good talent in a guy like a Carter or a Hunter, and then move forward next year and try and get a quarterback. It's totally possible for the Cleveland Browns. But then again, there is an argument for why they would take Shedeur. They're coming off of a terrible season. Kevin Stefanski, yes, is a former Coach of the Year candidate, but they did make the playoffs in 2023. However, we'll see how much leeway that buys Stefanski and his coaching staff. It's totally possible that they are with their backs against the wall, and they do need to draft a quarterback number 2. But all of that to say, this is why the Giants signed Russell Wilson. Picking number 3, there was no guarantee they could get the quarterback that they wanted, so they signed Russell Wilson just in case they couldn't. And if Shedeur Sanders is the quarterback that they wanted, and he goes number 2 to the Browns, the Giants are no longer screwed out of getting a quarterback because they signed Russell Wilson. So I think that's really the crucial takeaway here. But who knows? I mean, I definitely think that the Browns could take Shedeur Sanders, but I also think that the way that they're situated, they don't necessarily have to, especially if they end up bringing in Kirk Cousins.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, Kirk Cousins, in my opinion, is really washed at this point, but he was coming, that was his first year coming off the Achilles tear. So obviously, you're looking at the situation where the Browns, they could take Sanders, absolutely. And he has, a good floor. I don't see the ceiling for Sanders personally, but he's got a good floor and he'll bring some stability to that quarterback room. The veterans out there, it's tough. I mean, the Browns, Titans, if they want a veteran quarterback, they're going to have to probably trade for one. Obviously Kirk Cousins, if he gets cut, if he gets traded, whatever that might look like, the Browns are going to be bad. The Browns seem to me, Anthony, that they are positioning, if they don't go Sanders, they're positioning themselves to get an elite defense and then get the quarterback in 2026. That's kind of what it feels like. I don't know if Kevin Stefanski and those guys have enough time, though. Like, I think they kind of need to make a decision now. So it's possible. It's hard to say, honestly. The Browns also did extensive work on Jaxson Dart. So maybe they move up in the first round to get Jaxson Dart, too. It's a possibility. They go Abdul Carter and they go Dart. And then they get a quarterback. Plus, their defense is actually elite. And what's a really good way to support a young quarterback, Anthony? Have an elite defense because it gets the ball back. So, maybe they're thinking something similar to what we're thinking right now for the Giants.
Yeah, totally. And I'll say this. I think Stefanski does have more time than probably Giants fans feel because he's coach of the year established. He took a really bad Browns team to the playoffs just a season ago. This past year, his quarterback got hurt and, there was a lot of problems. So he probably has a little bit more time and power to stick around than we probably realize. I just want to throw this fun fact out there, though, Alex. Remember after the 2017 season, the New York Giants requested to interview and hire Stefanski as their new offensive coordinator, but the Vikings denied the request. What a different world we could be living in because Stefanski is viewed as one of the better coaches in the NFL. Anyway, though, the reason why the speculation is that Kirk Cousins would go there, Alex, just in case you weren't aware of this, Stefanski spent basically the entirety of his coaching career with the Minnesota Vikings. He was the quarterback's coach, then the offensive coordinator of the Vikings, and then went to the Cleveland Browns. But Stefanski and Cousins have a really good relationship, so you might think Kirk Cousins is washed. Stefanski might think Kirk Cousins was playing in the wrong offensive system over in Atlanta, and he could maximize him here with the Cleveland Browns, which is why I think they will land him ahead of the draft and why the Browns might end up passing on Shedeur Sanders there with the number 2 overall pick. So another super chat here from Mike G. We've got a lot of these coming in, so we're going to try and get through them a little bit quicker this time around, but I do appreciate you, Mike G, for sending this one in. He says, "Hey, boys, appreciate all you guys do. Big fan of the channel. Any good reason the Giants didn't go get a top guard? The middle tier guys weren't expensive like Tevin Jenkins. Depth is good, but need starters. I think they just ran out of money, honestly. They don't have a lot right now. I think that they were trying to hold on to the funding that they had in order to sign a veteran like Aaron Rodgers if they could have. They chose not to. But even this Russell Wilson contract with that $10 million cap hit dwindles the Giants down to only $3 million in cap space now. Yes, there's moves that they could make, but I think they're trying to be strategic to not restructure too many contracts and carry higher cap burdens in the future. So as much as they wanted to sign a guy like Will Fries, for example, from the Colts, he ended up going to the Vikings. They wanted to sign him. He went outside of their price range. They pivoted and addressed another need with Javon Holland. And after they did that, I think they really just ran out of cap space for what they were comfortable spending on this market. So I still think they're going to end up drafting a guard at some point in this draft, so they'll try and find a solution. But for the time being, Greg Van Roten did start 17 games for us last season. He was fine. It was really the injuries on the offensive line that caused that unit to plummet, but he was playing well before all those injuries took a toll on the rest of the unit. So as much as I would have liked to see the Giants grab a big-time guard, I just think the market didn't allow them to.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they're going to already have to restructure some money just to fit Russell Wilson's contract on the books. And with that being said, Tevin Jenkins, what did he get? Was it $3 million or something like that? Something really low. I don't know. I would have, probably restructured a little bit more to get him personally. I think that was a mistake. I think Tevin Jenkins would have been head and shoulders better than anything that we have right now at right guard. And why not go and do that? I will say this though, Anthony. Let's wait until after the draft to say it was a mistake, because it's possible that they have a guy they really like in the draft that they think could be a plug and play right guard, or at least compete for that spot. So who knows? Like, we'll see how things shake out. However, spending $3 million on a player like that would allow you to spend that draft capital elsewhere, most likely, or at least just go BPA and not have to like pigeonhole yourself into making a selection. So that's the counterpoint. I do think that was a mistake. So yeah, like, really good point you make there. In the super chat, like, excellent point. And I think that they probably should have done that, because it would have been a win-win move. You spend next to nothing and you get a winning above average guard that's way better than Aaron Stinney and way better than Greg Van Roten and way better than anybody else we have on the roster there. And, now we have to run it back with Greg Van Roten. And I like GVR. I just don't think he's a starter. I think he's an excellent depth piece. Great depth. I just don't visualize him being a good starter anymore. He's like 35 years old, and great option as like a backup center. What happens if JMS gets hurt and Greg Van Roten has to play center? Now you don't have a right guard, and they do have Evan Neal, by the way. So it's
That's where I was going to go. I was
and
going to
I
say,
don't
Evan Neal season.
and I am not a proponent of Evan Neal being anything this year, because he doesn't want to play guard. He has no motivation to play guard. He wants to be a right tackle. The Giants are not letting him play right tackle anymore. And he hasn't even started cross-training at right guard yet. You know what I mean? Like, he has no experience in the NFL, and he's injury prone. Like, there's no way in hell anyone can convince me that I'm going to put my chips in on Evan Neal being a good player for us this year. At the very most, he is a depth piece for me until proven otherwise. And if I've learned anything being a Giants fan, Anthony, over the last couple of years, it's this. I am not guaranteeing anything. I'm not saying this guy's going to be that, this guy's going to be this. I need to freaking see it before I believe it these days.
I was willing to bet it all on Malik Neighbors being good as a rookie. I'll just say that, but that's a rare
different.
case.
That's also a very different context.
Yeah, for sure. I also, last thing that I'll say on the Tevin Jenkins thing before we move on, since he did get such a low wage and the Giants were reportedly interested in signing him, I honestly, Alex, I wonder if he looked at the Giants offensive line over the last few years and said, I don't want to play on that unit because that's just a disaster waiting to happen. So then he chose to go somewhere else. Totally possible that the Giants offered a similar contract, but they lost due to the drag history of the Giants offensive line. All right, so we do still have a couple more super chats piled up here. This one from Bear315. Appreciate you very much, Bear. He says, since we have Wilson, how would you feel about drafting Tyler Shuck or McCord in the third round and get BPA first 2 rounds? So, Alex, not taking a quarterback in the second, but waiting until the third. I'll say this. I don't like Tyler Shuck. He's a 26-year-old rookie. Some of the plays on his film are gross. Yes, he flashed some upside. Yes, he was a tremendous high school quarterback. I'm not a fan of Tyler Shuck. I get where the appeal comes from. Yeah, pro-style offense this, Louisville that. All right, but he's a 26-year-old rookie. That's not the direction the New York Giants need to go in. And Alex, he's not a ready-made 26-year-old rookie. He's a 26-year-old rookie who barely has any starting experience in college and needs to sit for 2 years. He'll be 28 years old by the time he's playing meaningful snaps at the NFL. So for me personally, where the Giants' needs and priorities are, Tyler Shuck does not align with them. I think he's a day 3 pick. I don't think he goes on day 2. I think he goes somewhere between rounds 4 and 7, not round 3. Not a fan of Tyler Shuck, but Kyle McCord is a guy who I do, admittedly need to watch a little bit more. He interests me, but I actually do kind of like, if we're talking round 3,
Give me Milrow.
Will Howard is somebody that I like. Yeah, no, Jalen Milrow, I think everybody knows I really like Milrow, but I honestly fear Milrow could be a second or third round pick. So
yeah,
just in terms of those guys who are definitely not second round picks, I wanted to bring them up. And
like
also, I'm going to throw this out there. I do kind of like Will Howard. I'm going to throw out there, don't sleep on Quinn Ewers. From what I've read and heard from all these insiders, he's higher on NFL draft boards than he is on media draft boards. And a lot of teams do view him as QB3. Yeah, that's right, 3 ahead of Dart and Milrow. there are some teams that really like Quinn Ewers, and the reason being strong arm, pro build. He's built
Yeah.
like an NFL quarterback. And at Texas this past season, kind of lit it up with a torn oblique. I don't know how he played the entire season with a torn oblique. Rotating and throwing the football 50 plus yards with a torn oblique blows my mind. A lot of teams might view him as a guy who flew under the radar because he was hurt at points this season, but still played well in spite of that in many moments. Might be a lot higher on draft board. So I would actually keep an eye on Quinn Ewers late on day 3 if he's falling down the board and the Giants still haven't drafted a quarterback.
I agree. Looking at Quinn Ewers, he was once a top prospect. Yeah, the fall from grace for him has been dramatic. But if he would have had a good season, like think about this, Anthony, it really was up to him this year. If he had a good season, he would have been a top 5 pick most likely. But because he didn't, now he's considered a 3rd round pick. That might be one of the developmental players the Giants look at and say, this guy has the qualities to be a good player. He just maybe wasn't there with the development and coaching, and maybe we can offer him that. So, in terms of just developmental players, Milroe, you guys know, if you guys listen to my take on Milroe, I obviously think he's an amazing running quarterback. I don't think he's a great thrower. I think deep ball is good, but the intermediate to short stuff is so hilariously inaccurate. It's problematic at times. And that's kind of where I run into problems with him. He can't run a basic level offense because his game is predicated on the deep ball and it's predicated on his legs. And that is not going to play in the NFL most likely unless he gets a perfect situation, a perfect coaching staff that can really get the most out of him. It's going to have to be a fit. The fit's going to be critical for Jalen Milroe at the next level. But I think in terms of development, Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, like those guys, they could fit a couple different systems, a couple different schemes. I think that maybe the Giants would be interested. If they go the dev route, I could see one of those two guys being an option for them.
Yeah, I mean, Milroe is probably my favorite developmental quarterback in this class just because he's got the stuff you cannot teach in terms of his physical traits and athleticism. So I think that a lot of his problems are accuracy and mechanics problems. Mechanics can be cleaned up and fixed. So I do think that the New York Giants and Brian Dable's system, I think that Dable does a great job of fixing mechanics, as we saw with Josh Allen. So Milroe actually feels to me like a perfect match with Brian Dable. Now, moving on to this next super chat. Appreciate the last one from Bear315. This one from Robert Konya. Hope I said that properly. Said, thinking ahead, if we skip out on a rookie quarterback this year and Joe keeps his job and drafts one next year, do you think he will have to make the playoffs year 5 with a rookie quarterback to get an extension? Again, I think it always comes down to playing competitive football in December. And that's what I'm saying about the Giants this year. In order for Shane and Dable to keep his job this year or next year, I don't necessarily know if the playoff mandate is true, if they need to make the playoffs. However, they do need to be playing football that positions them close to the playoffs in December. No more being eliminated in October, November, December, playing some games within a spot or two of the playoffs. That's what I think is crucial. So, Alex, I'll read that one off again. If we skip out on a rookie quarterback this year, Shane keeps his job, drafts one next year. Do you think he will have to make the playoffs in year 5 with a rookie quarterback to get an extension? What are your thoughts on that?
Make the playoffs. Obviously, the goal is always to make the playoffs. I don't think the Giants next year, with the foundation we would have built having drafted Hunter or Carter and have this whole draft class and money next year as well, and the draft next year, I guess the question is, if they inject a young quarterback into a situation that's that good, yeah, you're expecting to make the playoffs, but you're expecting some hiccups along the way, obviously. So I don't know. It really comes down to what the team is actually like. Are they competitive? Are they losing by one score? There's a lot of context that goes into these things. I think, if they're losing by one score because their quarterback had a couple of hiccups, are they, it was their injuries. Like, there's a lot of reasons why John Mara at the end of the year could say, yeah, we just had some bad luck. We faced some good opponents. We lost some games we should have because the rookie was struggling and had a couple of hiccups and they just need more time. I think there's a lot of context that would say, yeah, if they miss the playoffs, they could still very well be extended if the outlook is bright, if the outlook of the future is good, the foundation is good. So far, Anthony, I really like what Joe Sheen has done this offseason in free agency. We've been very, very critical of Joe over the last couple months. I'm happy with what he's done so far in free agency for sure. But the draft is going to be what defines his future here. If he flops this draft, he's cooked. If he hits this draft, they're going to keep him another year and maybe beyond, depending on what happens. So I don't think it's playoff or bust in 2026 for Joe with a rookie quarterback. I think you have a lot more leash with the development of that young player.
Gotta nail this draft. And for what it's worth, Alex, if the Giants don't draft a rookie quarterback this year, going into 2026, the only way that Joe Shane keeps his job after this year is if the Giants win a lot of games. So, following that train of thought, I'm going to actually follow with me here, Alex. Let's say the Giants don't draft a quarterback this year, but win enough games for Joe Shane to keep his job. That means that Russell Wilson played really good football and probably gets an extension next offseason. And maybe the Giants still don't need to draft a quarterback next offseason. He's only 36. Quarterbacks play into their 40s. That's the line of thinking that I think some fans probably haven't thought of. But if we're talking about 2026, whether or not Joe Shane's going to be here, he's only going to be here if they win games. And if they don't draft a quarterback, that means Russell Wilson won him a bunch of games, and Russell Wilson probably gets a multi-year extension after that. So that's something that I think is on the table for the New York Giants. Maybe not the most favorable option. I know we want a quarterback of the future, but if the wins are coming in, I don't really care who the quarterback is. I just want to win some goddamn football games. All right, so next super chat here from SPP Williams says, from London, England, clarifying earlier from sending the super chat from overseas, says, riffing off your great chat about Carter, how does Golston and Ledbetter fit? Is Bowen going more exotic with his looks? So I think that the idea here with Golston, the edge rusher from the Cowboys that the Giants signed, is he's got some beef and some size to him to play on the interior, but he mainly plays on the edge. And what I think that he can do is kind of fit that Leonard Williams-esque role. Like I was saying earlier, lines up outside the tackle, inside the tackle, over the guard, and can even go between the guard and the center if you need him to, because he does have that size. Not saying he's the talent of Leonard Williams, but he's the size profile of Leonard Williams, allowing him to line up in multiple locations, which I do think is crucial. And then with Ledbetter, I think that he's just depth on the interior of the defensive line for the Giants, because let's face it, they didn't have enough depth. Yes, they had guys like Elijah Chapman coming on at the end of the year. DJ Davidson had some moments, but those guys really are not proven depth pieces. Ledbetter, on the other hand, is. So I don't know if it indicates that Bowen's going to get more exotic. I think it more so indicates that Shane realized adding depth on the interior was absolutely a priority. And yes, David 95, beefy defensive lineman. Give me all of that beef. I need it now. Alex, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that Shane Bowen's trying to get a little bit more exotic on defense, or do you side with me? He's probably just trying to add some depth on the defensive line.
Definitely some depth. I think having a solid pass rusher on a very cheap deal is always a good thing, a healthy one at that. I think this was a Azeez Ojulari replacement. Golston was a guy that was going to be able to offer you some pure pass rush quality, and he's going to be healthy. And that's probably what they were looking for, a good rotational number 3 pass rusher, barring any Abdul Carter drafting, that is going to be able to sit in there and provide you with some pass rush. And Ojulari was just unreliable. And I think they want more reliability, guys that have healthy, positive health histories. So yeah, Golston, definitely a good acquisition. I like that one a lot, and very nominal cost for a player who's healthy and is a pure pass rusher off the edge. Has some good size too. He can help stop the run, not at a very high level, but competent level. Ojulari had some problems sealing the edge, and Kayvon did as well last year. So I do think this was a nice little upgrade. The Giants made some really good defensive signings this offseason. I've been very, very happy with that so far.
I totally agree. Depth feels like it's been a priority for Joe Shane this offseason, which, man, have we not been screaming about adding depth all over this roster for years? At least he's finally getting the memo. Maybe he tuned into Fireside Giants this past season and realized we were right. Next question here, another one from Robert Konya. Appreciate you with another super chat. He says, Anthony, can you guys get Marshall Green on the collective with you guys for an episode? So I'll say this, Marshall and I have spoken before on Twitter, and we've expressed some interest in doing a live stream together at some point. We haven't done it quite yet, but I'm sure that at some point between now and the NFL draft, we'll have him on the channel, or I'll go over to his channel, something of the sorts. There will be a collaboration on the horizon. I don't know if it would be with the collective. I don't run that show. That's produced by another production team. I'm just happy to be a part of it, so I can't promise that I'd get him on the collective. In fact, I would actually probably say we can't add him to the collective. I don't know if we do guests on that show, but we can have him on Fireside Giants at some point. It is something that we will discuss with Marshall in the coming weeks. Now, next super chat here, Alex, from Cruzan26. Do you guys prefer Milroe or Shuck? I feel like we kind of already answered that, but I'll let you kind of go ahead and just answer that off the bat, Alex, and give your take between Milroe and Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Milroe in this one. Not a big fan of really either of these two guys, but Milroe has an elite trait, and I think that you gotta go after that. With the running quality. I mean, you just don't find players like that. Shuck, lengthy injury history. Like you said, he's gonna be 27 before he even sniffs a football field. Shuck, you're really drafting to be a backup. I don't visualize him being a starter. You're drafting him to be a competent backup. Milroe, though, like you just don't know what he could be. That's the kind of upside of Jalen Milroe. Is like if he puts it all together, this guy has ridiculous upside, but it's so unlikely he puts it all together. That's why he's falling down the draft boards quite a bit. But I would go Milroe just because you can't pass up on somebody who has that type of upside in terms of just with his legs, he can change the course of a game.
Yeah, I really think when you're taking a developmental quarterback, you want upside. That's what the Patriots did last year with Joe Milton as their backup developmental guy. They went with the most upside that you can find. I don't see the upside with the 26-year-old rookie in Shuck like I do with a 4.37 40-yard dash rookie in Jalen Milroe. So I like upside in my developmental guys. All right, so I know that we have a couple more super chats in here to get through before we do wrap this thing up soon enough. Sam Fountain didn't leave a comment on the super chat, but did leave one for us. I really do appreciate you, Sam. You're in here all the time. Again, you're one of the OGs of the Fireside Giants community. Much love and appreciation for this super chat. David95 leaves one as well and says, is there a chance Deion forces Shedeur to New York at 3 and stop Cleveland completely from drafting him? Seems like he wants New York over everybody. So I do think that the Sanders family wants to be in New York, but I also just don't think they have that kind of power. I think Shedeur is, if Shedeur was the bona fide number one pick in a draft, maybe this is a conversation. But considering on most draft boards he ranks somewhere between 20 and 50, I don't think he has this kind of power personally. Yes, it's possible, but I think it's wholly unlikely. Alex, what's your take on it? Do you think that Deion could try and make a move like that again? Personally, I don't think it's possible for them. However, I guess stranger things have happened. What are your thoughts on Deion maybe trying to get Shedeur to the location that he wants?
Listen, my take on this is going to be quite simple and very straightforward. Shedeur Sanders is not good enough to force where he wants to go. You know what I mean? Like, it's just simple as that. He's not better than Cam Ward. He's not the QB1 in this draft class. If he was, and he was Eli freaking Manning, or he was one of the best players, one of the best prospects at quarterback we've seen in a while, yeah, maybe he would have a leg to stand on. But this is why I want Deion to stay out of it. Let your son go through this process on his own. And I am just want to preface by saying very, very supportive of Deion being a great supportive father for Shedeur Sanders. But when it comes to the NFL, it's time for Shedeur to be the man that Deion has raised him to be and to handle it and fight his own battles. He has to face the reality of wherever you go, you have to be successful. Deion cannot step in and save his ass anytime something goes wrong. This has to be Shedeur's story. And I think that that's where I see, I don't think that Deion's going to force him to go anywhere. I think that he is just basically saying, we're okay with the Browns, we're okay with the Saints, we're okay with the Giants. We know where I think Deion said, I think I know where Shedeur wants to be in his heart. But unfortunately, that doesn't mean anything to NFL teams. You know what I mean? Like, the NFL teams are like, we have to do what's best for us, not what's best for Shedeur Sanders. So I think that we're going to see what teams do and see him as a pure football player. And if they feel that he is worthwhile taking out whatever selection he goes, he will go there. But Shedeur's opinion on where he wants to go does not make a difference at all to an NFL team, in my opinion. I think that's probably a realistic take as well.
Yeah, like I've always said, the teams are just going to take the players they think is best, and the players really don't have much say. And I also think an underrated element of this conversation, Alex, that I'm going to bring up here, because I think this is information a lot of Giants and NFL fans in general don't realize. That draft day trade that happened with Eli Manning many years ago, 20 years ago at this point, it's no longer possible. The CBA has changed, to my understanding and in my research recently. You can no longer trade the rights to a player on draft night. The player has to sign the contract first before they can be traded, and rookies do not sign their contracts until August. So I don't think it's possible anymore to do what the Giants did when they acquired Eli Manning in 2004 via trade on draft night. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong about that, and maybe something crazy happens. You never know. But ultimately, I don't think that anybody is going to force their way here or force their way there. I think that the top of this NFL draft is just going to be really exciting because all three of those teams, well, maybe not because we know that the Titans are going to go QB at 1, I think, with Cam Ward, but those two teams behind them, we really don't know for sure what they're going to do. Yes, the Browns might be leaning one way. Yes, the Giants might be leaning another. Both of those teams have a lot of needs and really could take any one of those top 3 prospects into their lap and just be happy with it. Pause. So we're going to start wrapping this thing up now. It's been a really fun hour. This thing flew on by, Alex. We had so many great comments, so many super chats, so many great fans and viewers in here, nearly 400 people watching us at noon to 1 o'clock on a Friday. Man, I say it all the time, the Fireside Giants community is the best Giants community on YouTube. I love and appreciate you guys so much. And another great discussion today, Alex, about the NFL draft, which I will remind everybody is only a month away. And next month, I'm going to be live for the entirety of the first round because even if the Giants make their pick at number 3 overall, if it's Trav, who knows? Maybe they trade back up for a quarterback later in the first. So I'll be live for the entirety of the first round, not just for the Giants' first pick, but I'm going to just stay live the whole time. All 3, 4, whatever goddamn hours, I'm going to be sitting there on the live stream. You guys can be ready to tune in with me and chat with me. So, Alex, before we wrap this thing up, you have any final thoughts and concerns, questions, whatever, regarding the Giants and their upcoming draft plans?
No concerns, my friends. It's a beautiful Friday. Tomorrow's going to be like 80 degrees in New York. Enjoy the weekend. If you're in the UK, enjoy the fish and chips. I don't know. That's the first thing that came to my mind. But I really appreciate you guys as always. And, much love to the Fireside Giants community. We're going to be here all off season, obviously leading up to the draft, free agency, training camp season. It's been a long time coming, guys. We have not sniffed success in quite a long time. Honestly, Anthony, we haven't really sniffed success since we've been doing this. Like, it's been 5 years, 6 years, and we've literally only been watching bad football. So we are praying the Giants can turn a corner and have a positive season, even if it's not the best, just trend in the right direction. Show us an ounce of upside and optimism, and we will latch on, and we'll be doing a lot more live streams moving forward because we have so much fun talking to you guys on the channel and obviously answering your questions and everything. That's going to be great moving forward to be more connected with you guys in the community. So much love and have a great weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. We'll, of course, continue to upload throughout the weekend. Maybe not stream. Maybe we stream. I don't know. We're kind of random lately. We're just doing whatever we feel is best and whatever you guys want. So you just let us know what you want in the comments, and we try our best to deliver. But yes, once again, thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode or a live stream. And make sure if you're watching the replay to leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you're listening to us in any of our episodes on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we will catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.